And we are live, a little bit late, and it's my fault. Hello, everyone. I think it's episode 8 or 9 for the year, and welcome, David Barrow. It's so awesome to have you back on the show again, and I think we're going to have a grand time.
I hope so. Yeah, thank you for
So
having
tell
me.
me,
It's an honour to be invited back.
the honor is all mine. Absolutely. You've been a busy boy lately, publishing books and being on all kinds of
Yes.
podcasts and webcasts and having fun, seems like it.
Yeah, it's crazy because when you're in amongst it, you don't realise quite how much you're impacting on people's timelines. And I have to sometimes think, I bet people are getting sick of me. So hopefully that isn't the case.
No,
And
I don't
you've
think
got some
so.
viewers here today.
Okay, awesome. So you'll see the people listening is go up and down, but most of our views actually comes from viewing the show later. So I've made it shorter this year. So it's only 30 minutes now because people complained that they can't stay on a treadmill for a whole hour, but they can do for half an hour.
That makes sense.
So, yeah, it does make sense. We're going to talk about two important things today. And I think putting those two things together is actually also very important. So, we're going to talk about the contribution that communities can make to creating value. Um, and then, specifically, when we come up with new ideas. So,
Sounds good.
why that topic? Because the guest is always the chooser of the topic.
Well, I guess there's a serious reason in that I can see communities are able to deliver so much more than just what we're going to talk about in terms of organizational change and improvement. Working as part of a community, you can actually deliver real human change. You can make a difference to people's lives outside of just the workplace. So I'm really fortunate that I'm a member of several communities now, some of which I've co-created and some of which I'm just a member of. But all of them are focusing on value, and everybody's definition of value is different, and that's especially pertinent when you're looking at professional versus personal allyship. So I think it's a really good subject to discuss, and also for those people out there that are working in organisations, it's also a way to help you get things done because unfortunately we can't do everything by ourselves. And I am somebody that's been working now as a consultant, you know, pretty much on my own or as part of small teams for the last 8 years, to the point where I kind of changed my job title. It's a self-professed job title of value co-creator. I'm still a service management consultant. That's the real world job title. But the value co-creator comes from the fact that I can go into an organization with all the supposed expertise in the world and all of the certifications, whatever they are, but I can't make any difference, any at all on my own. It has to come from working with people. And a great way to work with people is to form communities that are focused on value. And that's why I felt it was a good topic to discuss.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, um, some of you are getting sick of all of my adapt posts at the moment, but yeah, there's a case in point. Yeah, if it wasn't for heroes within the community that helped in the creation of adapt and the sense making it, and sometimes saying that you're an idiot, you can't do that. Yeah, it would never be something that's real that can actually go and help people. Incidentally, David is one of the adapt heroes who's contributed without any expectation. And I think that's another cool thing about communities. Communities are part of a community because they want to be part of a community, because they feel they belong. Um, and that makes contribution a much easier um, effort. I don't know if that's the right word for communities. Um,
I think so.
But that being said, communities without a driver also doesn't work. So let's talk a little bit about the role of leadership communities to ensure that value is eventually created.
Yeah, well, that's often the biggest drawback to getting a community to deliver that value is bringing leadership on board. And without wanting to add to the positive noise around adapt, but it's in there. It's the truth. You need to go and focus on what you're trying to achieve, what your true north is, what it is that you're trying to achieve as a community, and then really, as you build the community, start to understand what value means to the people you want to bring into the community, but the leadership that you need to support them. So when I go and work in an organization, I'll be given a list of stakeholders, which will invariably grow because I'll want it to grow and I'll need it to grow. And it's from there that I can then go and work out who's an impactor in an organization. So when I say an impactor, and again, this is not from any book, this is made up by David Barrow stuff, but hopefully it works for people. An impactor to me is somebody that owns something. So they might own a process. They may own a budget. They may own a team. They may be the CEO of the organization. But ultimately, if you don't understand what value means to them when you're starting to build your community of stakeholders and you're starting to build where you want to go, then you're not going to get too far.
Yeah.
So understand who your impactors are and seek out the ones that may have a negative view of what you're trying to do, because if you can change their minds, you're onto a winner. And that's where you bring influencers in, which is a different set of stakeholders. This is people that have a voice, they have a passion, or indeed they have a negative passion. So again, don't be scared to go and ask people about what you're trying to do. And from that, you can then build the community. If you can build a community of people that have a similar goal, I think it's very rare I'll build a community that have a singular goal. But as long as they know what the vision is and then how they can contribute to that, then that community can start to deliver great things. But it's about picking the areas you can improve on with possibly the most impact and the least effort. And that's where bringing that community together to decipher that's really interesting. And that's how, to return to the question, that's how you can get leadership on board. Because once they see you making a positive difference, they've kind of got no choice but to get involved.
Yeah. Okay. So a community, you say, then, is a great way of creating a catalyst, number one, and then momentum for change within the organization. And I couldn't agree more. But there was something else that you mentioned that was interesting. I just want to kill my email because
it's a bit extreme.
I'm hearing ding,
just
ding,
close
dings. I hope that you don't hear that. Yeah.
No, it's all good.
I forgot about that. In the Scrum Master, the Excellent Scrum Master book, we talk about the idea of a champion skeptic. Yeah. And giving the skeptic a specific role in the group, and their role is to tell you, what is not working. But it's actually a sneaky way just to get people involved, because the enthusiasm of the group can't but rub off. So I think that's one of the. It's one of the things that you're particularly good at is getting people on board, and being really sensitive to people's needs and maybe also fears. So how do you sensitize, first of all, whoever drives a community? And I'm not saying a community needs a driver, but naturally somebody comes forth that sort of, gives momentum, number one. And then the rest of the community members. How do you sensitize them to the needs of everybody in the community?
So where I think where it comes from within me, I'll be very brief because it's not really the answer to your question, but it's a good way to get to where I want to go. Is when I used to work on service desks, nobody ever called me to say, "Are you having a nice day?" So I was able to build up a way of speaking to people that would allow me to listen to what they were trying to tell me, decipher what they really meant to tell me, and then either solve it or assign it to the right person. So I've got that background working in service desks still to this day holds me in great stead because it allows me to have that empathetic view. But in terms of bringing people along, like you say, there has to be a driver for the community. So when I first build a community or co-create it, we talk about what value means to us, but then from there we build a charter. And that charter is
Mhm.
the areas that we want to go and concentrate on that we need to improve.
Okay.
And through doing that, we then talk about what our outcomes are going to be. If we know if this is going to be successful, what does the outcome need to be? And
Mm.
how do we share that appropriately?
Mm.
And then to keep that community infused, and this is a really easy thing to say, but a difficult thing to do. Bringing people from across the organization to guest on the community and talk about what they need. And when I say from across the organization, I actually mean customers, consumers, partners, anybody that delivers or receives digital services when it's in the digital context.
Okay.
But also bring some different voices in. People will get bored of the same voice trying to run that community every other week or every month. And also, you're not the only person that's tried it. So the great thing about today's modern world and networking is that we can go out and call in a favor from somebody and say, would you mind coming and guesting on my community and letting them know how you tackled this because you've already done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as I said, easier said than done, but the communities that I'm co-creating and working with now, I'm able to pull in people from the communities that I co-created and worked with in the past to add a different voice to mine. So it's about keeping it fresh and about showing people that value. That's why the whole point of what does value mean to you is so important, because if I understand what value means to somebody, I can relate that to everybody else, but also I can deliver something that's relatable to them. And and that really is the way that I try to work. And it's not 100% successful, but it's the majority of it is successful.
Yeah.
And that's how I try and do it.
And I mean, if it is the majority, then you're doing better than most. In any case, what I like about your comment earlier is that you said that you create a charter. So instead of a vision statement or a mission statement or whatever, you create a charter. Because what I like about the fact or the artifact of a charter is something that you do something with. Yeah.
Mhm.
Where a vision statement is something on a wall that goes off very quickly. Yeah. And after a while,
Absolutely.
it starts smelling.
Absolutely. And coming back to that charter, as does a charter, if you don't keep it fresh and keep understanding if you're still going in the right direction, that whole,
Yeah.
are we still moving in the right place? And I think the great thing about having something like a charter is everybody can get involved in what it looks like, and everybody can see where they can contribute. So I tend to break it down, or the communities I work with tend to break it down into several areas. So we all know we've got to go and improve a process, but let's not just focus on that because it comes down to behaviors.
Mm.
And what I tend to find is as these communities build and they look at the charter and they look at things they can improve, they're also the first time people have worked together where they're not under some sort of duress. So whether that's a major incident, whether it's a priority or a project that's running late or a deadline, we all only really tend to work with each other in those scenarios nowadays.
Mm.
It's kind of
Yeah.
bonkers. We sit there answering emails, going to meetings, and putting out fires. That's your average digital worker in this day and age. When you
Isn't
build a
that sad?
community, it's really sad, and I see it all the time. And I used to be that person, so that's another area where my empathy comes from. And I think by having those community conversations, understanding what value means to people, the crazy thing
Mm.
is next time you find yourself in that fire or a fire with that person, you've actually got an understanding of one another and you know how each other works. And actually, you improve that situation because you can work well together.
Yeah.
And that's one of the biggest benefits I've seen. So fires will always happen. There's no getting away from that.
Yeah.
No matter how much fire prevention we put in place to continue with the analogy, that'll always happen. There'll always be something that surprises us. But if you've spent time together outside of those scenarios and you've got a good understanding of one another, you're just going to work better together. You're going to feel under less pressure. You're going to communicate more appropriately. And ultimately, you're going to get to where you need to be more expediently and also work together to stop it happening again. So the communities tend to not just improve what's based in the charter, they tend to improve what's coming in the future, those things that you can't, they add value that you didn't know existed. That's how I like to put it.
Yeah, that's the cool thing for me is these new perspectives that constantly flows into the pool of ideas. And the fact that it's not stagnating. It's not something that is stagnant and, this is the thing and this is what we work towards. And what I also find is that it's really cool to understand when work needs to be done, who to ask to help and who not to ask, because first of all, you've got a much better understanding of their strengths and weaknesses, and number two, their passions. And I think that's even more important. Yeah. And quite often, people say, "But I'm happy to be involved. Tell me what to do." But if you ask the wrong things, it's somebody can only create value that they can create, isn't it?
Absolutely. We as human beings, we tend to see value in a situation, in the moment. And that's especially true when we're fighting fires. So if you're able to understand outside of those moments what value could be, which means you're not going to have to do that in the future. I end up always returning to knowledge management with these communities. So when we talk about enterprise service management, that fabled term, I believe communities can enable you to do that because there's so much we see in digital and IT that we know impacts other elements of the organization. But it's rare that we reach out into that organization and bring them to the table and say, look what we could do for you. It's always them saying, we need something from you and what can you do? When you increase your community to include people from outside the digital teams, you can start to offer value, again, value that they didn't know existed. But from the knowledge perspective, we have so much knowledge in IT on service desks in terms of all the stuff we do. That actually, if you read between the lines of that knowledge, you could use it elsewhere. So, for example, in the joiners process, so many hiring managers are filling out forms and trying to bring people in, and they've got a whole load of deadlines that compress how they can get that person in. They need them yesterday, etc., etc. If you can find ways to work with your talent teams and with your hiring managers to automate elements of that process once you've optimized it first, and that's what the digital teams can do, then you can add value into the organization. And it's value that they'll soon forget, because it'll just be great. They say somebody's joining and the kit's on their desk and the picture's on LinkedIn with the lanyard, the cup, and all that good stuff. But the reality is that's enterprise service management. And through the communities that I've worked with, a few of them have done that. They've really reached out into the enterprise and helped with things like sales, marketing, because once you understand what sales are trying to do and what marketing are going to send out there, you can start thinking about service design.
Yeah,
you can start to think about how you're going to support that service in 6 months. You can start to influence the organizational strategy because you can see from a digital perspective what you can offer that maybe they're not considering. But that only happens when you start to have that time to think as a community about what do we need to improve. It will never happen when you're chasing your tail or going from meeting to meeting.
Okay, let's change tact a little bit. Focusing on value means understanding what the value should be. how can communities help us to better understand value from a customer's perspective? Because at the end of the day, any organization, that's really who we need to satisfy ultimately.
So the way it works in the scenarios I've been in is by bringing people in that serve the consumer of your organization or the customer. You, as a digital team, get a much better understanding of that value. You're kind of in this master and servant relationship we tend to have in, IT teams being the servant to the organization. And I'm not suggesting IT teams are the master, because they're not. They need to be an equal. But once you extend your reach out to those that serve your customers and your consumers, you get a real idea of how they're using your services in the real world. So if I take the recent example from another piece of training I've done with Katrina McDermott's Humanizing IT, she cites an example of a guy working in an airport baggage handling who's got to check everything in on an iPad, but he's got the iPad covered in his lunch bag because he's near aviation fuel and rain. The iPad then becomes redundant. He can't do anything with that, can't touch it. So once you get to understand what somebody's using that technology or that service or that software for, then you can add value for them.
Yeah.
So it comes back to us having a seat at the table to influence strategy and influence ways of working. And you can start in my world, at least, you can get closer to that by building a community that brings those people in your organization into that community to help you understand that. And they don't need to be there at every single meeting, but they can be there as guests when it works for them, because that's how coming back to Agile Adapt, that's how you innovate, because you get a different perspective. If we all if we always carry on with we've always done it that way, or we're just not going to,
just listening to the sales team.
Yeah, absolutely. But innovation doesn't just have to be digital innovation. It can be thought innovation, and for me, communities are thought innovation.
Yeah, and I think that the danger of organizations, when we start talking about innovation, is that they always think it needs to be product related. And quite often, the most meaningful innovation that you can do is just by behaving differently and understanding why you have to behave differently. And it doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be business model changes.
I think that's a really good point, Johan, actually. I think that's a really good point. I was thinking of this before we spoke. There's 2 points there. So for innovation, people read speed. So they think if we do something quicker, that means we've innovated. Well, what it actually means is you've just done the same thing faster, and now somebody's got to pick up the pieces even sooner. But coming back to the behaviors, and this comes back to my own experiences, I've been guilty of using processes to facilitate outcomes. But if you don't have the behavior that facilitates an outcome and you just rely on the process, you're literally just going to get something A to Z. But behaviors help you understand how you can improve it, how you can tailor it. Yeah, you're so right on behaviors, basically.
Yeah, and value is nuanced. Yeah, you can do your process perfect, and your product can meet all of the standards and specifications, but if the way that the customer experience it sucks, is it valuable? And quite often it's people that make it suck. Yeah.
Absolutely. I've been one of those people. So yeah, completely.
Yeah, I'm sadly so, but I must admit, me too. Okay, luckily it's my podcast. I can say what I want. The other day I said to a friend of mine, my spiritual practice is not to be an arsehole. And he laughed. He said, I can give you a long list if you want to start the church.
True.
Yeah.
Very true.
Okay, so we've got 5 minutes left.
Wow.
is there, can you believe it? It's so quick, eh? 30 minutes is
Mm.
nothing. Is there anything that you thought that you wanted to mention tonight that we haven't talked about?
I think I'd love to mention that I do honestly believe that the value of community can extend beyond the workplace. And
Okay.
so I've been really fortunate to get involved in communities for women in technology recently. So that helps women in technology kind of break down barriers that really shouldn't exist. There's a great community running out of ITSMF UK for armed forces personnel to help them come into the workplace and work in service management. But also, what I'm really loving seeing at the moment is the use of communities to bring people together in terms of ways of working. So this sounds like I'm promoting, but the recently launched SciAM Global Community is fantastic because now people are getting to understand the organizational benefits of SciAM.
Mm.
So, and I think the other thing around setting up or wanting to set up a community is you need to ask people what value means to them. So you need to, it's a very brave question to ask somebody. And everybody will answer it differently. Some will say to you, do you mean from a professional point of view or a personal point of view? Allow them to answer it however they choose to, because it will teach you something about that person that you probably didn't know before. And if they're willing to share that with you, then the next question is would you help me by joining a community that's going to deliver that value? And I think it's so tough to ask. It sounds easy, but it's not.
Yeah, especially if you've got a very, you want to build a community around something, with very strong preconceived ideas, and in the Adapt community, most probably the most difficult thing for me, in especially the early years, is to hear from people saying it doesn't matter. Why do you bother? And the most blunt in my community from that perspective is most probably Richard de Kock, because he'll read through something and go, why? And then you have to sit back and listen, and you have to question yourself why. And I suppose it's a natural response in changing environments. When my value is getting questioned in an environment where changes are busy happening, it's or my perceived value, my personal perceived value of what I'm bringing to the party. Somebody else thinks this, but it's maybe doesn't matter that much. It's a difficult thing, eh?
And that's what makes it a brave question, because you might not get the answer you're expecting, or you might have to work for the answer. But ultimately, it teaches you so much about where you're working and who you're working with that it can help you to make a positive difference.
And I think the other positive experience that I had around communities and value and whatever is that if you find people that genuinely care, not about the thing only, but about you, the harsh words is never intended to hurt. And when I say harsh words, I don't mean being an AH, so I'm not going to repeat it twice on the show.
It's your show, you can say what you want.
But it's great if people can be who they are and can have a voice, because I think that's another cool thing for me about communities is especially open communities, like Adapt or SciAM or Katrina's value focused. Say that again. Value.
Oh, the humanizing IT.
Humanizing IT. Yeah. It's something that you're passionate about, but to find other people that can empathize is not the right word, but be as enthusiastic as you about something is special. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And very valuable. Okay. So always end with or I always end. So you've been here 3 or 4 times, so you should know by now.
See.
Give us 5 things
Mhm.
that you would do if you want to create a community around something important to get done.
Brilliant. I thought you were going to ask for 3, so this will be interesting. So I would go, you always start with assessing where you are.
Okay.
And that can be as formal as a maturity assessment or simply understanding who your stakeholders are and asking them what value means to them and what they're looking to achieve. Because if you don't understand where you are today, then you've not really got an idea of where you want to go in the future. And I would, as much as you can, make sure that that starts to build your community. So that's the second thing. Your community shouldn't just be those initial stakeholders. Build upon that. Go and find colleagues in the organization, customers of the organization, partners that help you to deliver those services, and bring them into your conversations, and from there, bring them into the community.
Okay.
I'll return to the point I made earlier for my third one, which is be brave. Be brave and
Okay.
ask the question. Be brave and approach people, but also be brave by challenging the conceived norm. Do it very
Yes.
appropriately for that organization, because every organization is different. But always seek to challenge that norm. But once you've built that community and you've got those people, and it comes back to something you were saying about honesty, be allies to one another, have one another's back. Positively challenge one another, do so respectfully. Build upon one another's ideas. Be the ally that's going to explore the idea, not just shoot it down.
Yeah.
Because there's always a nugget of something good somewhere. You need to explore that. It may not always be as obvious as it first appeared. And I think if you do that, you find value that you didn't know existed.
Okay. Cool.
And ultimately, the fifth one is do it step by step. Pick your battles, understand what you can achieve and what it's the priority to achieve, and understand if you can do it quickly and measure it as its success, and then use those to build upon and to continue that cycle of assessing, expanding your community, being brave, being allies to one another, and then step by step, continually. They're my 5 things.
Okay, awesome. I'm always bad at looking at the comments coming in from the streams. My apologies. So, Sitembele, hello. Simone, you know which Simone that is.
Yeah.
Lovely to have you here. Sorry I didn't read your comments earlier, but I agree with the statements. Andrea, actually, not Andrea. Andrea from... Sure. What time of the day is it at the moment in Australia, in Perth? Wow.
Late.
Yeah, so that's like an insomniac, eh? Amr, hello, mate. Good to see you again. Simone, absolute pleasure. Simone says, thank you for our time. Are you reading the comments?
I am. I was
going to see her here.
Thank you, Simone. Well, having to follow Simone firstly is worrying, but also knowing Rob England's coming next is even more worrying. So hopefully there's some value that people have found from listening to me. But I wanted to answer Amir's question as well, if I could quickly, because he said, what if there's no budget to bring or add value to the customer?
Yeah.
It's an interesting conversation because there's normally budget because people bring me in to add value. So it's a difficult one, but there's sometimes not enough budget. And so I can answer it from that perspective. And that's where that step-by-step piece comes in. Once you assess where you are, go and find out those things that you can tackle quickly and easily, which don't require much effort. And there will be tons of them. It's just nobody's been looking for them. They're value that people didn't know existed. And you arrive at those through building the community, through being brave. So go and scratch under the surface and you'll find.
And your sponsor
so value.
Will give you an idea where to start.
Absolutely. Their idea is normally wrong, by the way, but they give you an idea.
Yeah, no, but that's all you need, is to show that you can add value somewhere, and then the conversation is much easier. And that's why, I mean, like David, I also always start with an assessment. Why? Because if you ask me, can I help you? The answer is absolutely yes. And then the next question is how? And then I go, I don't know. So I know that I've got the ability to help you, but I need to understand your context first. And that's what a good baseline basically brings to the table. And then you can, with your sponsor in the organization, have an intelligent conversation about where to start, where you can, the old term of quick wins, it is a little bit trite sometimes, but it's an important thing. So it mustn't just be a quick win. It must be a quick, meaningful win. Yeah. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
And the danger of
and it
extending
must
the
be a
conversation.
meaningful win for the people who's going to keep you there long term, so that you can really make a difference. Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah,
I think
at the risk. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
I was
That's
gonna say,
one
at
of the
risk
things that David is a specialist at, is sussing out those things. And I know because I've spoken to his customers.
I think that's their proof of concept. So they're proof that the thinking and the behavior is going to yield greater results down the line.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're a quick win, but you're only arriving at them through changing behavior and changing ways of thinking. That doesn't mean huge change. It just means small change. And it's amazing how much you can do with just a little tweak. So yeah, I like to call them proof of concept. So this is the way we're going to work. We're going to try it in this little area, and we're going to see if it yields the benefits that we hope it would.
Andrea, I would suggest that you reach out to David also, because he's got a really, really nice way of working with people. Yeah, I'm a little bit too much of a South African Dutchman sometimes. Yeah. I'm come across a little bit too blunt. But David, absolute pleasure, mate. It's always such an insightful conversation when we have the opportunity to chat. I just wish we had more time to do that. Yeah. I suppose we must just make more time. Yeah.
Absolutely. That'd be great. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure. Just stay online. What I'm going to quickly do is, if you want to have a chat with David, let me just bring that other thing up again, and I'm going to just make it a full screen. It's changing. There we go. Okay. Remember, Rob England next, and then Erin Castile. So 2 people from down under. So one from New Zealand and one from Aussie land is up next. These 2 shows will be early in the morning. So it will be GMT, most probably 7-ish, to accommodate them also. Then if you want to have a chat with David, there's all his detail. This is all public information. I copied it off LinkedIn. So just in case you're asking me about GDPR, David.
No, it's all on the website.
It's fine. And then the very last thing that I just want to remind you of is that the launch of Agile Adapt is happening this month. Go and check it out, support us, see the awesome stuff that we do. And I can say we, because there's a bunch of heroes that has helped us to put this stuff together. Stay in touch. See you next time. So 2 weeks time. And love you.